Adeus. Navachire. Senagre. Tisha. Hey, you understood what I said, right? I said it slow. Now I'd like you to repeat after me. Ga, ba, Chito. Hey, there's no need to interpret that for you either. You said it pretty slow. And you repeated after me, right? You know, as I was sitting there, I was wondering, what are they thinking I am? Do I look Latina to you? Yes? Maybe? Right? Maybe Mexican? I don't know what a Mexican looks like, but hey, they say the brown people look Mexican. Maybe do I look Hispanic? Possibly. Right? But no, I'm going to tell you a story. I come from, my hometown is San Bartolomé, Sogocho, up in the highlands of Oaxaca. It's full of vegetation, clouds, rivers, mountains. Up until the age of 10, my universal language was Zapotec. And that's what you just heard right now. One variant of over 60 variants of Zapotec. That's all I knew. I did not know about anything else but my community, San Bartolomé Sogocho. I thought it was the best place on earth, and that was it. That was the world for me. I still think it is, though. That hasn't changed. I grew up in this community where we grew our food, where I could drink water directly from the mountain. You can't do that nowadays. And our traditional regalia was communal property. All of the women could wear it. All of the women could embroider our traditional regalia. I was raised by my two grandmothers in Sogocho. They were taking care of me after my parents had left to Los Angeles. One day, they said, "You're gonna go meet your parents in Los Angeles, to the white man's land." How deep colonization is, because those two grandmas never learned Spanish, much less English. Yet they call this land of indigenous relatives the white man's land. That's how deep it is. And I said, "Where's the white man's land? Where's Benegash's land?" They said, "Behind the mountains." My first city that I encountered behind those mountains was the city of Oaxaca. I did not know the name of Oaxaca. We all love Oaxaca, right? We all do. We all love the mezcales, I'm sure. But I didn't know it was Oaxaca. I knew it as La in my language, but I had never seen it. The next stop was Mexico City, which of course I didn't know it was called Mexico City. It was called Cita in my language. And my final destination was Los Angeles, the white man's land. The one thing that these three cities had in common, guess what it was? There were no trees, no rivers, no birds. I knew no one, and no one spoke my language. And in these three spaces, the food was terrible. My first US food was those sugary cornflakes. It was the worst experience coming from a community where I had a tortilla every morning made by my grandmothers. Having coffee, yes, kids drink coffee up in the highlands, but it's not like your Starbucks coffee. It's like really watery and sugary, and it's delicious, So those was my first experience. But also, that's the first time I encountered racism when I came to the United States. The minute I left my community, there was hundreds of labels waiting for me to fit into them. First, it was Oaxacan, because all I know is I'm Bener Rojo, a woman from Sogocho. Then there was Mexican. I guess I was Mexican. I was born in the Mexican Republic. And then once I crossed the border, the imposed border, I became Latina, I became Hispanic, I became everything. All these labels were just laying there for me to step into them. But guess what? I refuse. Because there was one message that my grandmothers gave me when I left. And I left because they found out I was being sexually molested in the community. And they sent me here to reunify with my parents. So I go through 2 family separations. The first one with my parents, the second one with my grandmothers, but also my community. That is a communal I was taken away from a communal space. Once I got here, things changed. Nobody knew that I spoke Zapotec. And people still don't know that I speak Zapotec. People still don't know that I am not Latina, that I am not Hispanic, that I am not Mexican, but I am Zapotec, Bener Rojo. I would prefer to be called that, but that doesn't happen because, the labels are still there, but I still refuse to fit into them. And this is why I say Latinidad is very dangerous. Labeling us is dangerous because you cannot fit our 500 years of resistance as indigenous people in one block. You cannot fit hundreds of indigenous languages within one box. The hundreds of indigenous worldviews in one box, in one umbrella. In our case, in the Mexican Republic, there's 68 indigenous nations. Did you all know that? And there's 364 languages spoken in Mexico, indigenous languages, besides Spanish. That's 364 different worldviews. 364 ways of resisting. 364 ways of saying I love you. Right? Why do we want to put that into one box? No, we can't let that happen. But it poses danger, that labeling of Latinos, Mexicans, Guatemalans, because when we come here, there's an assumption, and even in Mexico, there's an assumption that everybody speaks Spanish. And that is deadly in our lives as indigenous people. I am an interpreter, sometimes, but I was a child interpreter, and I've seen firsthand the impacts of Latinidad. When I was a child, I was bullied because I didn't speak the language when I came here. I was monolingual. I will never forget that woman in that red jacket with the curly hair and the light skin to call me an uneducated Indian because I was speaking to her in a not proper Spanish. That was 41 years ago. But 2 months ago, those comments were made by our city officials. So it hasn't changed in 41 years. Right? They made the exact comment about indigenous peoples, about Black people. And not only that these people were Latinos, but they represent the largest population of indigenous people in LA County. MacArthur Park, Boyle Heights, the Valley, that's where indigenous Chinantecos are. The Mayans are there, The Mayans are still here. I know that we hear all these things that they were gone, but no, they're here. They represent our communities. So imagine if this is the way they think about us in a closed room. I'm so glad it leaked. Because that way it gives us the opportunity to have this conversation today. It's uncomfortable, but it's vital. It's vital for the liberation of indigenous peoples. And it's vital that we have this conversation because each one of you will encounter an indigenous person, be it if you're an attorney, if you are a doctor, if you are a receptionist, no matter what field you are in, you're gonna encounter us. If you have tacos on the corner, or if you go to a high-end restaurant, you are gonna find us there. And next time, pay attention. We're not speaking Spanish. We're speaking Zapotec. We're speaking Quiche. We're speaking Mam. We're speaking Mije. It's not Spanish. And indigenous languages have no relations to Spanish. But I've seen firsthand when a child has been removed from their parents and the Department of Social Services has taken them because the parent did not administer a certain amount of medication. Because there was no way to communicate, because there was an assumption that the parent spoke Spanish. And they did not follow instructions, therefore endanger the safety of the child. Yes, this is true. I've seen this. I've seen where the judge reads the charges on a parent, where parents are about to be medicated because people assume that they spoke Spanish and that they were Latinos. And this is the danger. Because our freedom, our health, everything is at stake. And we can no longer think about people from south of the imposed border that we all speak Spanish. Because it's very dangerous. It's dangerous to every one of us. We lose our children. I know that the detention center was a big news a few years ago, a few months ago. That hasn't stopped. Most of those children detained are indigenous people whose human rights are being violated currently because there's an assumption they come from Mexico, they come from Guatemala, and now they're coming from Nicaragua. They are Latinos. No, we are not Latinos. Did you all know that indigenous people make 10% of the world population? But we have 80% of the world natural resources. Do you know what that means for us? Displacement. Your liberation is linked to ours. Because if we lose all those natural resources, there will be no air to breathe. In my home state, the state of Oaxaca, 427 mining concessions had been given to transnational companies. Sure, it's in Oaxaca. It's far away from here. It's more than 2,000 miles from here. But we all breathe the same air, right? So we're all going to be impacted. So we need to join forces because our liberation are linked together. We can no longer talk about Oaxaca is down there and we're up here, it doesn't affect us. No, it does affect us. It's very dangerous for all of us. And this is what we say, like we need to make a clear statement. And I stand here at the age of 51 saying, no, do not call me Latina. Do not call me Mexican. I am an indigenous woman from Sogocho. Because this makes a difference to create awareness of our existence as indigenous people. The nation states have created a story to label us, to Latino, to Mexicano, to whatever they want to do in order to erase our existence. By us not existing is a great thing for the nation state. But we're going to continue resisting. And for that, we need your support. We need your support, each one of you in this room. There's a silence. Do we have your support? Yes. Because you're going to make a difference everywhere you go. Next time you find a person that looks like me, that probably is dressed like me, and by no means I'm Frida Kahlo. Ask, do you need an interpreter? Do you speak another language? Don't assume that we're all Latinos. because again, we contribute to the violation of indigenous people's human rights. So I ask of all of you today that when you go back to your regular places, be that uncomfortable person when somebody makes a comment that the city officials made at your dinner table in Christmas. Yes. Be that uncomfortable guest that will say, no, you cannot make those comments. Because that's where solidarity begins, from your home. When we migrate with everything. I migrate with my language, but so the other Mexicans, so the other Latinos with their prejudice and racism towards indigenous people. And we have to be that uncomfortable guest at that table. Do we have your solidarity? Yes. Because again, no matter how far we are, we're going to breathe the same air, and the water's going to come back to our oceans. Yes. So, Dios creen, te cree. Thank you.